Well, this has been a bit of a week. We had a pretty massive sell off in Tesla stock market in general. A bit of a panic. We have vandalism really escalating on Tesla vehicles and superchargers and Tesla stores, and then we've got
Peace in the Middle East.
peace in the Middle East. We've got
Trump shilling Teslas.
Tesla's at the White House. A lot of well-known conservative commentators kind of suggesting that people buy Teslas for to support Elon and the mission. Wow, this is like we're used to volatile weeks as Tesla investors, but I can't think of one with more kind of insane price action coupled with I don't know, mixed emotions on panic on the way down, extremely negative sentiment. Is Tesla brand permanently damaged? And then like, hey, we've got this really exciting new support in terms of new orders. What do you make of this week that we just went through, Bradford?
Well, let's just start with the new orders. So it's been my supposition that Elon is gaining more Tesla customers in the United States than he'd been that he caused brand damage in the U.S. Maybe there's some brand damage in Europe that's gonna cause sales to decline, but I thought that he would gain people from that are fans of him shrinking government, that maybe they vote Republican, maybe they don't, maybe they're more independent, but that they're fans of his efforts. And last night there was a chorus of Tesla influencers like, what can you do to support Tesla? Let's hear more about you buying cars or shares or whatever. Let's write the chairwoman a letter and all this stuff. And turns out Trump says that he's buying a Tesla to support Tesla. Then today we have this meeting at the White House, at the front of the White House, with Trump saying that he bought a Cybertruck for Kai, and he's showing off the other Teslas. And then Elon shows up, and really amazing. Sean Hannity says he bought a Tesla Model S Plaid.
I loved that clip, by the way, because he's like, what is this? An S Plaid? Like these people have. It's so funny to be watching. These conservative commentators who like 10 years ago were trashing EVs as like just stupid, and like I think they would even say that it was bad for the planet. Like you had Bob Lutz like as a regular on Fox back then, just talking about how terrible like Teslas are, and
Teslas have no advantage, no technological advantage, no advantage whatsoever.
So you've got like that backdrop, and then now these are the same people 10 years later who are like being like, hey, did you know like this has dog protection mode where like you can basically like keep your dog from overheating and like check on them through the app. Like this is really cool. And it's like, yeah, that is like so old news. I can't believe we're still talking about this, but this is something, I mean, it kind of dovetails a little bit with one of the criticisms I've had of Tesla for a long time is like, nobody knows this stuff. We know all this stuff. We've known it for years, but there's been no serious effort anyways at educational advertising. And while that is starting to change a little bit organically now, just with what's going on politically and conservatives starting to become a little bit more aware of Tesla and what Elon is doing, it just seems like a bit of a missed opportunity that like we had to wait so long to like make these very basic points about Sentry mode, and like the fact that because there's no CO2 being emitted from the tailpipe, you can like through the app start your car anywhere in the world. Like you couldn't do that with a gas car because it might be in a garage and you might start it up. So like there are just so many of these little things that we all know that have just gone by the wayside. So on the one hand, I'm like just super glad that this new cohort of potential customers seems to be opening their eyes. But on the other hand, it's like this, like there's a lot Tesla could have done to avoid the continuous march down of ASPs and, frankly, like dwindling delivery growth over the last couple of years that we've seen. So I don't know. I feel a little bit mixed about it, but overall net positive, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's good because there's people that are gonna pick up the banner, or buy Teslas. They'll find out more about Tesla and learn about these different advantages, and the word will continue to spread. I think what we're going through in general is the the chasm. So you have like the early adopters, and then there's the chasm. There's a book called Crossing the Chasm, where you need to get to the early majority. So maybe like this is the way that Tesla crosses into the early majority in the United
Hmm.
States, where I think in China, the penetration of electric vehicles into that market is much more profound, and they might be on to the early majority already. Um, where Europe, I think we're still crossing the chasm with EVs.
Yeah, I think that's right. The U.S. consumer is not as as tech heavy as they seem to be when they're buying a new phone. It doesn't seem to be the case that they want that same experience with the cars. I mean, we even saw today in Trump's comments about how he was saying, "That's right, you're going to delete the steering wheel in a year." Like that's I don't want that, but I'm glad you think you're going to do it. So there are so many people have this reaction of oh, that seems like a pretty bad idea. I was actually giving my daughter had her birthday party this past weekend, and I was giving a bunch of her friends a ride. I didn't even tell them it was in self-driving, and I just had it drive home, and then eventually they realized that I wasn't touching the wheel. And they're like, "Well, what if it makes mistakes? Like, that's probably not a very good idea." And it's like, no,
Mhm.
it's actually perfectly safe. But there's just an example of how much education I think there still is to do on just how safe these vehicles are, and how amazing the ownership experience is. The stuff that we were so bullish about from 10 years ago, it's just starting to be picked up on now. But the story's already changed to
Mhm.
autonomy, and what a game changer that is. And it is. I don't know what the right answer is to increase awareness, but I wonder if Tesla should be doing something a little bit differently. And I'm curious your thought. Do you think at this point where we are right now, it seems like Tesla's probably not going to do anything differently, given
Yeah.
how they haven't
Well,
shown any interest in
they
doing that. But do you think with autonomy,
yeah.
they were talking about pushing rides for every time an FSD, every time somebody takes delivery or does a demo, but I don't think they're actually doing that as far as I can tell. So what is the solution here to increase awareness?
So I do want to mention we got Matt a new mic, so that's why Matt sounds so good. You
No,
could
it's
lean
actually the
forward a
same
little
mic I've
bit,
had for a
Matt.
long time, but I'm hoping to
Matt,
um
you could lean forward a little bit so your head. There we
is
go.
this good? Do I
Yeah,
sound good now?
really good. That's really good. Um, yeah, I think Tesla, they tried video, but they didn't try it long enough. I'm not an expert on video, but you need to like hammer home your message over multiple tries, multiple instances of sharing your message. And it's my opinion. It feels like Tesla tried it for like 6 months, but you really need to do it longer than that to really try it and measure it. And one example I'll give is I did advertising for my local business and was really advertising financial planning. We had all kinds of videos and we would run them as ads on YouTube. And I think we did it for like 6 to 9 months. But like after I turned it off, there were people who reached out and became clients and they talked about the videos they saw on YouTube. And I was like confused at first because I had turned them off. Uh, but it shows that like there's this long lag time. And I think that's one issue with cars. Maybe that argues Matt to not advertise. It's like in a given year, maybe only like 7 to 10% of people are in the market for a new car.
Hmm.
But you mentioned dog mode. People love their pets. Like you could easily do a video where it's you're drawing at the heartstrings and like showing dog mode. And maybe there's like a piano in the background. It's like those ads with the piano. They
Oh,
they
you really
always show
storyboarded this all out. You've got a piano in the background. What kind of
I
color
mean,
do you
like the
have?
piano music, they try to get you going emotionally, right?
Uh-huh. The little Sarah McLachlan, I will remember you.
Yeah, there you go.
Just showing a dog dying in a Toyota or something like that. If only we'd had
Not
a
quite.
Tesla, Fido would still be with us.
But it dog mode is cool. Like I don't know if it's 2019 or 2020, but basically someone tweeted at Elon's like we should
Yeah.
make this dog mode so that the AC stays on when the dog's in the car. And then Tesla one upped it and they put this big thing on the display. When you turn it on, it says um, climate set to blank degrees Fahrenheit in really big letters. My owner will be back soon. So
Mhm.
it's uh, that's just something really cool that Tesla did. Maybe you just show that path where someone tweets at Elon and then someone writes the code and they get it out to owners.
Yeah, that was a pretty exciting time. I mean, we got Joe mode at that time based on like an actual ex user named Joe who didn't like that the signals, whatever the noises would wake up his sleeping child in the back.
Mhm.
Just like that level of I don't know, user or consumer attention, something we all know, but I think the broader market doesn't. Bradford, you're getting a little heat in the comments for your pronunciation of chasm. They're saying it's not chasm, it's chasm.
Okay.
Which you've been saying it like that for a while, but I always I thought that was just a second way you could say it.
Chasm.
Chasm.
Okay.
Wow, there we
I
go.
shall endeavor to do better.
I was surprised. It was like three different comments. Um, yeah. So aside from these new, well, actually, on the topic of kind of this new cohort potentially of potential buyers. So on top of Trump, which everyone is aware of, Sean Hannity, you mentioned, is saying he's buying one expressly in
Mhm.
support of Elon. Grant Cardone, who is he's a wealth manager. I've heard a couple things he's done. I don't actually know too much about him, but he bought his daughter and his wife a Tesla just to support what Elon's doing. Then Brian Kilmeade, who's also on Fox, was saying that
Mhm.
on air that you should be buying a Tesla to support Elon in response to all this negativity. So there's just the tone, taking a step back, like the tone of where Tesla was on Friday, let's say, or
Mhm.
even Monday. I mean, just stock plummeting, um, hate and violence on Elon and on Teslas, and like this actual like people being physically concerned for their safety. And there's been a lot of instances which are like actually really concerning, like somebody throwing a rock through somebody's window and they had their 3-year-old in there. A lot of like insane behavior that's going on right now that frankly I think a lot of people on the left are not doing any like enough to condone. um but you had this as
They're
like the
not doing enough
backdrop
to refute it.
to
I
review.
mean,
Yeah, I think every week I have to use the wrong word to mean the exact opposite of what I say at least once. It's like it should be a bingo card or something like that. Yeah, so like we're
you get
starting to
one
see.
more. You get one more this episode, Matt.
All right, yeah, my 3-year-old was a terror last night. I got like 2 hours of sleep probably, so I think the over under is pretty high this week. Um, but so you've got this situation now. I think there are some more and more people fighting back against this and say like, no, you can't vandalize property. That's insane. I think I saw somewhere, I'm not sure if this is true, but that it's actually going to be classified as an act of terrorism if you're causing this level of vandalism. Oh, here it is, Jordan. All right. Trump says he'll label violence against Tesla dealers domestic terrorism. Like I know how that's going to play out on the left. They'll be like, oh, Elon is getting special treatment. From my standpoint, like I don't know what the right response is, but like absolutely like pressing charges against people who are like literally firebombing and shooting up dealerships,
Yeah.
and like this is violence and property
Yeah.
destruction, and it needs to
So
be prosecuted in my
yeah,
mind.
so we think of terrorism as like killing people or like mass bombings, things like that. But terrorism really is um, doing things to instill fear into people to get them running scared. So if you're like trying to discourage people from or being too scared to drive their Tesla around, um, the vandalism and the fire bombings that's terrorism. So it's pretty clear, and we agree that it's anarchists that are doing that. It's not representative of people who voted for Kamala Harris.
Yeah. So it's just it as an investor and as a Tesla owner, even it feels really good to know that like there's going to be a crackdown. I mean, I was reading some story, and you never know on Next if some random personal story is legitimate or not. But I was reading some story of this girl whose mom was posting on Reddit, I think, trying to get advice because charges were being pressed against her daughter, who I think firebombed a Cybertruck or something like that. I don't remember exactly what she did, but was part of this recent wave. And it's like it's gonna stay with her record forever, and it's going to be like extremely hard for her to get admitted into college and to like
Have a
even
decent
get a
job.
job. Yeah, and I'm like this. Yeah, like if you are going to be like literally terrorizing people and like causing like fear because you think you're right on the political spectrum, you should have very severe consequences. Like I'm a big believer in forgiveness and everything like that, but like this has to get put in check. Like this is not okay behavior for a civilization. And if it was the right that was doing this, I'd say the exact same thing. I mean, this is we need to be debating ideas and not terrorizing people to conform to ours. Like that just is not okay at all. So I definitely support the hammer coming down a little hard on some of these anarchists that are causing this real damage. So, but just taking a step back from an investor standpoint, with where we are right now.
So I want to make a point here. I don't think necessarily like the tide has turned, and just because one day a bunch of commentators are buying Teslas, it doesn't mean like people are going to remember this a month from now. So like I think like Trump needs to stay on it with his Tesla. So like showing the new Tesla he gets, like that would be really helpful. Or Sean Hannity or Brian Kilmeade. So like to stay on it a bit, I think would be meaningful from here because people will forget this.
Yeah, I think one of the things we saw back in, I don't know, 2018, 2019 was that whole like butts and seats. Like the more people who drive a Tesla, the more people who will drive a Tesla because they show their friends, they show their family. And I suspect, that just hasn't happened a lot on a conservative side. And so like I think these cars will actually sell themselves, but like you need that first like toe in the door to help that happen. And so I do think you're right. Like this is not just all of a sudden every problem is solved and we're back to all-time highs next week. Like this is there's clearly a bit of trouble brewing, and maybe we'll talk about like production and deliveries because I think we're still in for a very weak Q1. But looking at the broader picture, I think this does have me encouraged for the first time that like we're actually seeing tangible evidence of what was before just a thesis that more conservatives might be actually buying Teslas. Now we have at least some anecdotal evidence, and you're right. I think as we time goes on, and hopefully we see kind of more and more of this, and people being proud of their Teslas, and showing family and friends, they'll be like, you know what, like politics aside, this is just a great car. I think that's the truth of the matter. I mean, nobody ever, well, I should say, I never bought a Tesla originally because of politics. Big renewable energy advocate, and I just loved the car and I love the tech, and like that's really all that matters at the end of the day. So I think we'll get there. One other nugget while we're on the topic of
Can I give a quick aside here?
No,
So
you're done.
I originally bought a Tesla in 2019. I wanted to better understand the technology. So the reasons I got it were for technology for the self-driving. And even then it was just like on the highway. But then also safety is really important to me. So Teslas are very safe. You want to be the heavier car in an accident. So they're a little heavier, not a ton, but they're a little heavier. And also the safety design is just very low to the ground, unlikely to roll over. So it's very safe in accidents, and they have a low probability of injury um, as studied by NHTSA. So like the Teslas hold the top four of the lowest probability of injury. But in addition to that, you have the convenience of charging at home. So literally your home charger is like your gas station. You never have to go to the gas station. You don't need to go and change brakes. You
It's
don't
funny
need
what a misperception that one is, though. It's like, oh, but like supercharged, it's like slightly
yeah.
slower than fueling up, so it probably is awful, and I probably can't buy one for that reason. It's like,
uh,
no, it's like your lived experience is that it's significantly better.
Yeah, you just plug it in, and in the morning it's charged to your desired charge level. You don't need to track nor do brake changes or oil changes. Like you might need your brakes changed after like 120,000 miles, so you don't even need to track it or worry about it. That's a crazy thing. They're fun, so the acceleration is great, and they're great to drive. So like when you do this thing called one pedal driving. So like the motor does the braking. So when you let off of the accelerator, and you'll learn how to feather it, but when you let off, that does the braking. So
Mhm.
it's like immediate. So like you don't need your foot to go over to the brakes. Immediately when you let off the accelerator, it does braking.
Yeah, it's yeah. I think you've got a future in Tesla sales if you're ever looking for a side gig.
So if you're like triggered into buying a Tesla, you won't be disappointed. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
There can be a bit of a learning curve too. I mean, so we
Yeah.
recently bought the Model X, and my wife doesn't drive it very often. So like her first time driving it recently, she was just like really annoyed at the one pedal driving thing, and
Mhm.
like the Falcon Wing doors were just like, like you got to get out of the way from them, like move the kids out of the way, and it was just like a little frustrating. And I was like, oh man, like maybe this wasn't a good idea to buy this car. Then the second time she drove it, she's like, all right, actually, I really love this car. So
Yeah.
like it it does
When
take
you
some
get
getting used
comfortable
to.
when you get comfortable with your Tesla, people realize, like, how awesome it is to drive.
Yeah, there's like all the benefits are crazy. I think most of our audience is probably well
Yeah.
aware of most of these features, but I think it bears repeating because there probably are a lot of people who are maybe fans or are maybe investors. I mean, I was an investor for a long time before I actually bought one of the vehicles,
Mhm.
but I felt like I had to for just diligence really on the self driving side as well. Um, on the topic of self driving, Elon dropped a bit of a bombshell, although I think it was probably
Mhm.
less so than the Uber Bulls might make it out to be. That over the next 2 years, Tesla was going to be doubling. What does he say exactly? Doubling production capacity in the U.S. over the next 2 years. So this is potentially a pretty big deal, and Elon couched it in saying that it's in response to the great policies of the Trump administration, and because he's wanting to invest in the future of America. But as I'm looking through what the production capacity actually is right now,
Okay.
it's well over, it's probably close to 1 million units. I think actual production last year between Fremont and Texas was around just under 700,000, roughly somewhere in that neighborhood. Now maybe capacity is a bit higher than that. Maybe it's close to 1 million, like you said, like I said. But then if you're doubling that, um, then that'd be, let's call it 2 million generously in the US. So what I would say is he said this when Trump was when Trump was talking about deleting the steering
Yeah, so
wheel and talking about autonomy. And so what he's really talking about is Cybercab reaching production volumes, which he said would actually be like 2 million units. So the more I tear this apart, the more I'm not sure that there really is any news here. Um, certainly kind of good to hear that he's still optimistic about it, but I don't think there's any kind of massive positive takeaway for Tesla investors here. But I'm curious, what was your reaction when you saw that clip?
well, I'm just seeing it now for the first time, and their stated capacity in their last presentation for the shareholders was about 1 million. So essentially, he's talking about adding capacity for another 1 million, which
Hmm.
I think is pretty bullish.
But
And
it's not new, right?
maybe a
Based on what
portion
he's
of it is Cybertruck. Well, for it to happen in 2 years' time, I think is a bit bullish. I
Well,
don't think
he talked about ramping to 2 million cyber cabs, and doing that like in 2026. Now, maybe that was a global figure, and I don't think he actually meant that they'd be doing 2 million vehicle output in 2026, but kind of ramping the S curve up to hit that run rate. So maybe it's 1 million in the U.S. and then I don't know, 1 million in China, or 500,000 in China, 500,000 in Europe, somewhere like that. But even going with those figures, I just don't think it's necessarily anything new or related to Trump's policies per se.
right. Yeah. All right. So what's next, Matt?
Yeah, so let's pivot to geopolitics a little while. There was rumor, all the news seemed to break like 15 minutes before we went live today. So this may have
It was
evolved a little bit since we
all
last
in a
checked
half
in.
hour. It was pretty
But
crazy.
there was a proposal. I guess Ukraine and the United States were talking together about getting to a ceasefire. Ukraine apparently has accepted this as part of a broader effort to getting to an end to the war. Zelensky, in a post, said that Ukraine has always wanted peace from the beginning. Slightly different tone than when he was in the Oval Office recently. And basically said that they're willing to agree to the terms of this 30-day ceasefire. That would have to be accepted by Russia, obviously. So kind of remains to be seen exactly how this will play out. But I think at least seeing some positive momentum towards an end to this war. I think that's certainly a good thing. And I think you saw the markets kind of bounce when this news dropped. So I'm not convinced that this is the end of the war in the next 2 months or anything like that. Because it's going to be hard to agree to actual peace terms when the devil's really in the detail with this sort of thing. And I think a 30-day ceasefire is a lot easier to agree to than to like permanently give up lost territory if you're Ukraine, for example. So a lot of work left to go on this, but certainly a positive indication, I think, that we might have some peace in this conflict that has been going on for far too long now.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes from here. I feel like Russia has broken a lot of the ceasefires. There were even some during the war once Russia invaded in 2022. There were, I think, at least 2 ceasefires, if I'm remembering right, that Russia broke. So it was just like tricks. So, oh, we're going to do a ceasefire over here. And then they end up using that to their advantage. So I'm curious to see where it goes from here. I think it's better than nothing. And to get to an end of the war, I think would be great. Provided that all sides can get a win out of it, a win out of the negotiations from here, and what they're able to take home to their constituents.
And you've been a massive proponent of Ukraine from the beginning, and I'm curious. I mean, at this point, with how much territory Ukraine has already lost, not to mention the lives, the cities destroyed, what does getting a win for Ukraine look like at this point in your mind? Because it's like, is the win just that there's no more killing? But it doesn't seem to me that they're in a particularly strong bargaining point at this point.
Yeah, I wish I could bring up a map right now, and maybe Jordan can work on that. But essentially, Russia took Crimea, and then Crimea has all this offshore natural gas deposits, and that was in 2014. But then they began to encroach on the east side of Ukraine. And there's a big fracking oil deposit there. But then they swoop down and they I'm trying to do this backwards. They grab like a bunch of Ukraine's territory along the Sea of Azov. So they're making Ukraine more and more landlocked as time goes on. I think it'll be very hard for Ukraine to accept losing all that territory. And I don't think Russia needs to keep all that territory for them to get all the wins. So maybe Russia gets Crimea and they get all the natural gas deposits there. Maybe they don't get to keep the Donbass or that eastern side of Ukraine, but they get the fracking oil deposit. So where you see all those red dots on the east side, that's where a lot of the fightings happened recently. And then the highest concentration area of that's near where the fracking oil is. It's like east of that. And I'm forgetting the city that's there. So Ukraine on this map has regained all those portions that are like the light blue, or like the slightly darker blue. So they've regained those portions, and Russia has taken the darker red portions. So I don't think Russia's going to be able to keep all the darker red, but we'll see. That's kind of my theory. Russia can say that they got rid of the Azov fighters, who they're calling Nazis. They can claim some other victories, maybe some of its natural resources or guarantees around pipelines and things like that. So I think that's what's in it for Russia. Ukraine, I think, would be getting some of their territory back. There's some pretty ugly things that have gone on in this war. Essentially, Russia kidnapped over 20,000 people. It may be in the hundreds of thousands of people, where Russia came in from that east side. And this was around Mariupol and Melitopol. And basically, when they took that area, they bust those people out to Russia and separated families. Zelensky wants those people back. And I don't know if that's possible. So, like, I don't think Zelensky's going to get everything he wants. He wants all the territory back. He wants all his people back.
Yeah.
And he wants some security guarantees. And I don't think he gets all that.
Yeah, I heard John Bolton in a debate a couple months ago basically saying that, like, we're going to keep fighting until Ukraine gets all of its territory back and all of its people. And it's like,
yeah, that's not going to happen.
I know we don't want to like negotiate with bullies or whatever, but like at the same, like, you got to also address the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is, like, unless there's a serious escalation of this war where, I don't know, maybe you put like NATO troops on the ground actually like fighting. I just don't think that's a realistic possibility. So we got to live in the realm of the possible, not in the realm of what we think justice would actually look like.
Yeah.
And it's a tough situation for sure.
I don't know how long this negotiation goes on, but the U.S. could threaten to send more military aid to Ukraine. A lot of people don't know this, but essentially Ukraine got enough to slow down Russia's advance. That's basically what they ended up getting. So the U.S. gave Ukraine enough to stop Russia, and then after they stopped Russia, to slow them down over time and to disrupt their offensive operations. They really never got enough aid to kick Russia out. So I don't know what this negotiation is going to look like, but there can be different ways that this is going to look, where people might be surprised by how it goes from here.
So I tend to think of things in probabilities of, like, okay, what are the odds that we actually get a peace in the next, I don't know, let's say 2-3 months? How do you think about that, given all the complexities with this current situation, the obviously very justifiably strong emotions on the Ukrainian side, and all the international players here? I have a really hard time trying to figure out what the path to peace is and how likely it is. Do you have a sense of how likely you think it is that we actually get peace in the near term or the medium term?
I'm thinking some new thoughts about this. So there's people that also say Russia needs this war for their economy. and that their economy might fall apart if they don't have this war.
That sounds crazy to me.
I'm not sure how that computes, but I think something could happen in the next 3 months. I think that's within the realm of possibility. I'm not sure if I would call that like 40%.
Okay. So turning away from the war a little bit, obviously we've got ongoing uncertainty there, hopefully some kind of glimmers of light. But when we're looking at macroeconomic data, we got potential recession looming, a lot of concerns about the economy right now. Doge probably adding a little fuel to the fire. I think I'm in the camp that's probably some temporary pain for a more sustainable and healthier economy in the long term, but that doesn't mean that there won't be temporary pain that could well be reflected in equity markets for a while. How are you thinking about the kind of current macro situation we're in?
Yeah, and there's the whole thing with Doge, and you just had your 7th child, and they're talking about rescission.
Mm-hmm.
But that has to do with the budget, not with having more children.
Yeah, I thought that's where that was going.
So rescission it's something they could do with the budget where they can reduce how much they're spending. So
yeah, because the executive branch was not even allowed to not spend the money that Congress had authorized. So even if they said like, oh, this is actually like waste, we don't need this. The rules of rescission, there was some Supreme Court ruling a while ago. I'm not an expert in this, but learned enough to get dangerous. They actually can't not spend the funds that Congress has allocated, which is kind of wild. And that just obviously creates a crazy incentive to just spend as much as possible. And who knows like where that's all going. It just seems like such a boneheaded thing. Like Congress, there's no way Congress could be able to draft a massive budget and know with certainty that every single dollar of that budget is going to be spent wisely. So having some discretion to say, hey, no, we actually don't need this bit over here, as a taxpayer, that just seems like a very obvious thing that the executive branch should be able to do. Now I guess you could argue that it might get used as a political weapon. Oh, I'm not going to support anything for Planned Parenthood or whatever, things that would like really cause people on the other side of the aisle to like really feel like they're being targeted. So I think with anything, there's a lot of things that sound good on the surface, but when you dig into the details, that there might be some reasons why. But I mean, this one, all things like on balance, it just seems very obvious that you should have some mechanism to like a release valve for some spending to say, okay, no, we're not going to spend all this money.
Yeah, that would be the wise thing. Yeah, it was sounding like, okay, Doge is going to identify all this wasteful spending, but then like Congress is going to spend it anyways, or not reduce the deficit. So we'll see if we get actual budget cuts. That could potentially cause a recession, or getting rid of all the federal workers. That could weaken the economy. I think a lot of this flip-flopping on tariffs isn't good. Businesses want some certainty, and if you're part of the big three in making a bunch of cars in Mexico and Canada, you can't be feeling good right now because you're faced with 25% tariffs. There's all these parts that go between the borders when they're the sub-assemblies, and then they assemble the car and all that stuff. And the big three can't just move their production in the US in a matter of months. Like, I'm not even sure if a year is long enough, but
no, I don't think it is. I mean, so I was this is going back in the history books a little bit, but like 13, 14 years ago, I was working as an investment banker, and we were selling one of a tier 2 stamping supplier, that made a lot of like assemblies, like for the fuel tank and some seating assemblies and stuff like that. They're just stamped metal parts. But a big part of what we were kind of pitching to potential buyers of the company was that they were expanding their operations in Mexico. So as part of this, I had to come up with like a map and like show all the different like OEM investments in Mexico. And I was really surprised when I went through this exercise at like how close together the auto OEMs and then their like tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers were in Mexico. And when you started like total tallying, like there's a $2 billion plant here, there's a $5 billion plant here, there's a $500 million supplier plant right down the road. Like these companies have invested tens of billions of dollars in this Mexican infrastructure. And if these tariffs just come in overnight, like that creates a lot of business uncertainty. And if you're Mary Barra or the CEO of one of the other, companies, whether you're an OEM or a supplier, how are you supposed to think about how long lasting these tariffs might be? Like, sure, maybe you're like, maybe it pencils to invest $2 billion in a plant in Detroit or wherever in Ohio, as long as those tariffs are for real. But with the way that Trump negotiates, it's like, next week he might change his mind and say, no, we're gonna completely cancel this policy. So I think the fact that there's no certainty on this makes it extremely hard to push for new capital investments on what are long-lived assets that you need like a 10-year plus like horizon in order to justify spending this massive amount of money. So like he highlighted some good wins with Taiwan Semi, for example, during his State of the Union kind of address. But I think it's going to be hard to get it's like sustained levels of like U.S. investment from like these companies that are currently operating overseas, unless there's a much more kind of clear picture of what the rules of the road are for the next like 10 years, not just what the policy is today.
So I think Trump talking about recession or some economic weakness, I think that helped trigger the decline yesterday. The market kind of hung in there today, so we didn't see much furthering of a decline, unless something happened at the very end.
Which if I could just chime in with a side comment, Tesla, with its geographic diversity and like local manufacturing plants worldwide, hilarious to me that it's down 15% on the day when everyone's worried about tariffs, because like they're probably better poised to handle that situation than like almost any other company. So, but anyways,
so I think it's more an association with crypto and with companies that generally don't have like super solid earnings. So on Friday, they had the crypto summit at the White House. And if you're hoping that the US government would be buying crypto sometime soon, you were sorely disappointed. Basically, they said, okay, we've confiscated this crypto through legal action, from criminals or whatever. We want to audit that, find out how much we have, also secure it so that it doesn't get stolen by corrupt people in the government or whatever. But they said, we're not spending taxpayer dollars on crypto, at least for now.
Yeah, they did make that very clear that like this can add to the deficit.
So there was a big crypto sell-off. MSTR was down huge. For whatever reason, Tesla is somewhat trading with Bitcoin, with Lemonade, with crypto, like it all kind of trades together. So you had this big down move. It was kind of shocking to see the magnitude of it yesterday. And there wasn't really new bad news about Tesla otherwise. Like I can't think of I guess there were the terror attacks on Tesla showrooms, but those are isolated incidents. There's 7 million Teslas out there in the wild, and less than 100 have been affected by these incidents. And the superchargers, I think there's over 60,000, if not like 70,000 worldwide of supercharger poles, and you had like 12 of them burned down. So I don't think there was new bad news about Tesla. Do you, Matt?
No, it doesn't seem like it. I mean, this is just one of the things we really try to do is get a gauge on sentiment. Sentiment seems extremely low right now, which can be a pretty good bottom signal.
Yeah.
We're not calling the bottom today or tomorrow or this week or anything like that, but my sense is, given the magnitude of that crazy drawdown from all-time highs that we had, I mean, that is a absolute cliff if you look at the stock chart. So there's all sorts of institutional selling. There's, I think retail panic. You highlighted before how much margin was kind of in the system. And I think a lot of investors who maybe got like a little over enthusiastic when we were making all-time highs. I saw some posts at the time. I won't name any names, but we saw people kind of like, adding to their exposure near the top and maybe adding margin. And that can be really painful to see. But when you're a forced seller, when the margin loan comes due, that just creates pressure no matter what the price is doing, and that can create a pretty crazy spiral.
Yeah.
So
Early
it
in the
doesn't
year,
seem to be fundamentals.
Earlier in the year, there were people adding leaps. There were also people like racing to do their Roth conversion first thing in January. And I think like if you're going to be using margin, using leaps, or doing Roth conversions, you want to try and pick a bottom in the stock. So like picking a moment in time when Tesla stock's doing really well, probably isn't going to be the best going forward.
Yeah, the problem is in those moments, so many people feel like, right, like everyone finally sees Tesla like I do, and so it's gonna be $1,000 soon. Like you definitely get that kind of FOMO energy building up at that. Like when you've got a couple weeks where it's up 15%, 20%, 15%, like you're feeling really confident. Like you're like, of course it's not going to go back down to the 200s.
Yeah.
So I think you get that false sense of security. And we're actually kind of advising like exactly the opposite. I mean, you want to be like reducing margin when everyone's feeling euphoric. You want to be, maybe making a trim and then adding to exposure when like panic is high and it feels really uncomfortable to do that.
Yeah. So stock was down quite a bit. It feels like fear and uncertainty are pretty high. But we're not sure the indexes are done going down. Maybe we continue to get a bounce this week. But it feels like the worry about Trump, the worry about the economy, all the margin that built up in the system. And the last time margin peaked was in November 2021, which is a month that'll live in infamy for many Tesla bulls, because that's when it hit $400 the last time. So if you have margin coming down, that's going to put pressure on stocks for a while. And the margin doesn't just come off in one day. We'll post the new margin stats when they come out, but it takes time. It doesn't just come off in one day. We did look at short selling to see if there was like a noticeable uptick in short selling yesterday, and we use folks called S3 Partners. They have a product called Short Sight, and what we found out from that is there wasn't new short selling yesterday.
Well, a lot of Tesla investors might remember Ihor. He used to be really great at posting kind of Tesla short interest back when it was over 30% in the day. So he's still out there. They're doing great work, but I think he just doesn't post as often. So we've got access to that information and have found it pretty helpful in kind of assessing, short level on a more frequent interval than you can see just through the kind of 15-day reporting cycles that you get with a lag just through like NASDAQ and NYSE. With the rest of the economy, though, I'm kind of curious. So like, we've got obvious over leverage that was built up in the system. Bit of concern brewing around like GDP growth. What concerns you, or how concerned are you with what's going on right now in the broader economy? I mean, with federal employees potentially being laid off and reduced spending, like, are you worried that there could be a pretty serious recession that would kind of impact people's day-to-day lives, or would it maybe be a technical recession where like you're getting some of this maybe fluff out of the system that wasn't really economically very useful, and so people's day-to-day lives might not be impacted too much.
Well, egg prices are starting to come down. Everyone was posting that on X. A bunch of chickens were culled late last year due to fears around avian flu. That caused the price of eggs to shoot up. That's starting to come down, so it's lower than when Trump took office. I don't feel like there's anything majorly wrong with the economy. Um, maybe some of this will, maybe some of the uncertainty will cause people to rein in their spending. So, like, take a pause on spending on renovations or on vacations. There might be some households that do that. But I think in general, most people are just doing what they've always done.
So I tend to agree with that. I don't think there certainly will be pockets of pain, but I agree. It doesn't seem like there's anything structurally wrong. That said, like looking at putting my investor hat back on, looking at the multiples of the Mag 7 relative to the rest of the broader market, and just kind of concerns in general that this market sell-off might not be done. How do you kind of think about that risk? It's so hard to call a bottom, but we had an amazing ride up for like the last 15 years, basically a little bit longer than that. After the Great Recession, few bits of volatility along the way, but if you look at the 15-year, 20-year chart, it's like, okay, it's like the Great Recession was a bit of a dip, or a blip, I should say. So when you're thinking about this kind of current moment, or like, it seems like you sense it'll be something potentially similar, where we might have a bit of a dip, probably not as severe as that Great Recession, but you'd be wanting to be investing again on the back end of it. So how are you kind of thinking about the short-term risk with the longer-term goal that you have as an investor?
Yeah, I think of a further downturn as just an opportunity for us. Matt and I have been working hard on finding some other companies. For people who are like all-in Tesla investors, there might just be like a couple other companies we own for them, but we do have like 80% of our clientele are people who are diversified, so they're not all in Tesla. So we're looking for other companies that we think are going to benefit from like fully embracing AI, but automation in their business, and really pushing on that to reduce costs in their business, bring more value to their customers, even delight their customers, maybe.
Using a little lemonade lingo.
Yeah. So we're using this time. We're not just like staring at the big red arrows down. We're using it to find new opportunities. We do have some new names, and what else?
Well, maybe asset rotation. Anything you want to say on that front?
We're a little heavy in cash, but it's hard to like try and time a re-entry in the stocks in general. So like if you're sitting in cash, like you need the world to get more uncertain before for it to go lower. And it can be hard to wait that out, and like eventually the market is going to be higher. So it can be kind of risky to hold some cash, but we do right now. And we happen to raise it before Monday, but past performance is no guarantee of future results, and your mileage may vary. So what else, Matt?
Well, maybe we could round it out with kind of outlook on Tesla. So we've been talking for probably a month now about how weak Q1 is going to be.
Mhm.
As I'm looking at more and more data coming in, Bitcoin price falling, for example, that's going to cause a more serious adjustment in adjusted earnings per share that doesn't get backed out. So like my earnings estimate, which already was a bit on the bearish side, I would say is probably getting a little bit more bearish.
Mhm.
I think deliveries, I don't remember what we had in the model, maybe 380,000. I think that might end up being a little high, which is sad. But like
Mhm.
this Model Y like changeover thing, it's like the numbers out of China today were good, but not amazing. It's not like they've immediately ramped back up to full capacity in China.
Yeah, my quick read was like maybe it's at 50% now in
Yeah,
China, which is I think pretty good.
yeah.
But you want to see them ramping more, and then they'll hopefully get up to full capacity toward the end of the second quarter, so by the end of June.
Yeah, yeah, and then we were also looking at older Model Ys too, because there's still a very large inventory of those, and like we were looking at the website and like, okay, these actually aren't that much of a price difference from the new Model Y, but then if you look at the used inventory, it's like, okay, there are $3,000 to $6,000 discounts on the old Model Y. Um, we saw one performance Model Y that was marked down a little over $6,000, I
And
think. So
these are new with no miles
brand
on.
brand new, no miles, eligible for the tax credit. So you basically get like a $6,300 Tesla credit and then a $7,500 like tax credit on top of that.
Mhm.
So there are some really great sales on Teslas right now, but that means bad news for margins. So we had some pretty negative margin assumptions in there, kind of taking this into account. That's offset
Mhm.
a little bit by some FSD recognition that's going to happen this quarter, both with the launch edition and then some recognition since capabilities have shipped in China now.
You about
So
to break
there's
some news? I'm feeling like you're building up to something here.
no. I think it's like I'm just going back to the model, and I think it's mostly negative actually for Q1. So I mean, we had I think like 25 cents somewhere in that neighborhood, and I think if I put all the puts and takes together right now, it'd probably be like 20, maybe a little bit lower than that. Just guessing. So
Mhm.
it's just I'm really optimistic, and it seems like the tide has turned on Tesla. I think autonomy is going to like be the entire story in the second half of this year, maybe along with the new models launching, and we're not going to have this like acts of terrorism against Tesla. I think this whole news cycle is going to die down. But in the short term, like we still got a month plus to go until we get the earnings report out, and that's going to be a pretty rough band-aid, I suspect, to tear off. Now, a lot of times Tesla dumps into an earnings and then rallies on the news, or like the reaction of the stock to how good or bad the earnings might be. A lot of times the reaction happens leading into the report. Sometimes like the reaction goes the opposite way of what you would think it should based on the quality of the report.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to say, but all that is to say, I'm just not sure that we're out of the woods quite yet, but it seems like we're getting close.
All right. So Sasha asks, and they're asking about your puts and takes. So are you factoring in some FSD revenue recognition from China?
Yes, so I am factoring some of that in. I want to say it was in the neighborhood of like 100, 200 million, something like that. So that's a nice positive. But like the problem is take rate's been so abysmal in China. I mean, it was basically 1% 2 years ago when it was first reported, and I suspect it has like fallen since then, which is pretty hard to do when you're at only 1% overall. So there's just not many vehicles in China that originally opted to pay for it. But there certainly were some, and on a fleet of 2.5 million vehicles, even 1% is a meaningful number of FSD recognition. So that'll be a decent positive. I think the bigger, maybe not in Q1, but I think the bigger trend going forward is that with FSD actually being functional and one of the best ADAS systems in China today, I think the take rate's going to increase from here. We spent a lot of time trying to research what a reasonable take rate might be. We think it's going to be a nice kind of benefit, but not the sort of thing that, is like all of a sudden they're doing $2 billion a quarter in FSD revenue, like from all these sources. I think they'll get there eventually, and that's going to drive the stock, but not next quarter.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this plays out. It may sell the rumor by the news, so it might be kind of opposite. So instead of like you shooting up before the announcement, whether that's production and delivery or earnings, maybe it sells down and then just shoots up after the announcement, like no matter
Don't
what.
extend your arm when you're doing that motion. Just word of
Okay.
warning. You don't want to get into this territory.
Okay. Yeah. No. I won't.
Yeah. So
So
I
he's
mean,
Matt Smith. I'm Bradford Ferguson. It's been good rapping with you. And with that, we're going to wrap it up and say bye for now.
wrap it up.
Cue outro, Jordan.